For more than 3 decades, Royal Lodge has stood on the edge of Windsor Great Park, like a house holding its breath. Nestled among trees and long curving drives, it looks at first like any other symbol of royal continuity. A graceful residence in a landscape shaped by history. Yet inside its pale walls, a different kind of story has unfolded. This is the home where Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew, long divorced but never truly disconnected, continued to share a life that defied conventional endings. Separate bedrooms, separate titles, separate destinies. But shared routines, shared jokes, shared memories played out over quiet breakfasts and late-night conversations. To the outside world, Royal Lodge represented privilege, a substantial home, extensive grounds, the unmistakable aura of status. But for Fergie and Andrew, it became something more complicated. It was a sanctuary built on familiarity, a place where their past was not an awkward chapter to be edited out, but the architecture of their daily lives. Over the years, this house watched them weather storms of public scrutiny, financial difficulty, and shifting royal expectations. As Windsor's ceremonial spaces grew more formal and strategic, Royal Lodge remained stubbornly personal, the one corner of their world that seemed to resist reinvention. And so a quiet question hangs in the air around its shuttered windows and lit lamps at dusk. If this house held them together when so much else fell apart, what happens when the security surrounding it begins to shift? In a monarchy where nothing stays untouched forever, even a refuge can find itself on uncertain ground. Royal Lodge did not begin as a symbol of survival. For Sarah Ferguson, it was first a setting, a comfortable base woven into the routines of royal life. In the years after her most difficult headlines, it quietly became the backdrop to something more deliberate, a slow, determined rebuilding of who she was in the eyes of the public. Step by step, she reshaped her working identity. She wrote children's books that drew on imagination rather than controversy. She appeared on television not as a scandal figure, but as a woman willing to speak candidly about resilience, parenting, and second chances. She became a visible presence in charitable work, especially in areas touching on children, health, and well-being. Each engagement, each project, was a small brick in the wall she was trying to reconstruct. From the outside, this looked like a straightforward story of reinvention. But for Fergie, it was a more intricate balance. Reports suggest that she was acutely aware of how memory lingers in the British public imagination. No appearance, however warm, was entirely free from comparison with her past. Every compliment carried an echo of what had come before. Every success was quietly measured against earlier misjudgments. Royal Lodge helped to steady that process. It provided a fixed point from which to venture out and to which she could always return. Interviews prepared at a familiar kitchen table, manuscripts revised in a quiet room overlooking the grounds, charity speeches drafted under lamplight. The house offered structure when reputation felt fluid. Within its rooms, she could be both the Sarah, learning to navigate a new media landscape, and the mother determined to create a gentler world for Beatrice and Eugenie. Yet even in its comfort, the lodge reinforced a subtle dependency. The more her professional life was planned from within its walls, the more closely her story became tied to the man who remained its principal occupant. Her public optimism rested in part on a private arrangement. A former wife who stayed close, not in defiance of their history, but because of it. For a time, the reinvention worked. Fergie became once again a familiar, even endearing presence, someone who laughed at herself, acknowledged mistakes, and seemed determined to move forward. But the foundations of this new image were not entirely hers to control. They were anchored in a household, in a shared past, and in an institution slowly moving towards a different kind of future. And the house that helped her rebuild would inevitably test how strong that reconstruction truly was. Observers noted that she often seemed most at ease when speaking not about royalty, but about ordinary struggle, debt, self-doubt, the effort of beginning again. That relatability became part of her appeal. Yet it also underscored how fragile her position remained. A woman shaped by royal life, trying to be understood on human terms, while still living in a house that silently reminded everyone of how unusual her story really was. Behind the warm interviews and renewed invitations, a quieter reality followed Fergie back through the gates of Royal Lodge. Reinvention may have softened public perception, but it did not erase the practical pressures that had long shaped her life. Financial strain, past debts, and the cost of occupying a world still adjacent to royalty created a constant background hum of concern. Reports over the years have highlighted the complexity of those finances. Business ventures launched with hope, but not always sustained. Partnerships that drew scrutiny, and the ongoing challenge of funding a lifestyle connected to, but not fully supported by, the institution she once formerly belonged to. Royal Lodge offered stability, but that stability came with obligations, upkeep, maintenance, and the optics of living in a substantial residence at a time when public conversations about privilege were becoming more pointed. Within that setting, the nature of her relationship with Prince Andrew acquired additional layers. Their continued cohabitation reflected long-standing affection, shared history, and a family-first instinct that prioritised a stable home for their daughters. But it also created a form of mutual reliance, emotional support intertwined with practical necessity. The house became a place where loyalty and livelihood were difficult to separate. For Fergie, this meant certain choices were quietly narrowed. To remain at Royal Lodge was to remain woven into Andrew's world, even as his own public position grew increasingly complicated. Opportunities had to be weighed not just against her own reputation, but against how they might reflect on the household as a whole. The more she defended him in public, the more her own image became bound to his. Inside the gates, life may have seemed steady. Shared meals, family gatherings, the odd moment of laughter echoing down a familiar corridor. Yet under that surface was a fragile equilibrium. The comforts of the lodge came with an unspoken cost, the acceptance that her independence, both financial and reputational, would always be influenced by decisions and developments beyond her direct control. As the monarchy moved into a period of review and recalibration, especially under the direction of King Charles III, that cost became harder to ignore. A residence that had once felt like a shield against the outside world was gradually revealed as a focal point within it, a visible reminder of an arrangement that some admired as loyal and others quietly questioned. What had long been sustainable in private now faced the slow, steady pressure of a changing public mood. In that sense, the hidden cost of Royal Lodge was not simply financial, it was the way in which comfort could delay difficult decisions. As long as the lights were on, the gates familiar, and the routines intact, it was possible to believe that the outside world could be held at bay. But houses, however grand, cannot permanently insulate their occupants from shifting expectations. Eventually, those expectations arrive at the front door. No royal story truly changes in a single day, but certain moments allow the public to see what has been gathering for years. For Fergie and Andrew, that moment came when Royal Lodge itself moved from quiet backdrop to headline subject. What had long been a domestic curiosity, a divorced couple sharing the same home, was now framed within larger questions about cost, accountability, and the direction of the modern monarchy. Discussions about the future of royal residences had been underway for some time. Under King Charles III, the emphasis on a more streamlined institution brought every substantial property under closer review. In that context, Royal Lodge was no longer just the place where Fergie and Andrew had built their unusual post-marital life. It became a case study in how tradition and practicality collide. Reports suggested renewed scrutiny of financial arrangements, tenancy agreements, and long-term plans. Commentators began to ask whether it was sustainable for a non-working royal, facing significant reputational challenges, to retain such a residence in its existing form. The house that had once been shielded by discretion now sat in the full light of public discussion. For Sarah, the shift was especially delicate. Her presence at Royal Lodge had always rested on a mixture of personal history and private arrangement. Now it was being interpreted through a wider lens. What did this living situation say about royal priorities, about loyalty, and about the use of resources tied to the crown? The narrative moved beyond affection and familiarity, towards policy and principle. Inside, the rhythms of daily life may have continued. Dogs walked across damp lawns, lights clicked on at dusk, letters opened at the same hallway table. But the atmosphere around the house had changed. Each article, each commentary, added weight to the sense that Royal Lodge could no longer simply exist as their private refuge. It had become a symbol in a debate much larger than them. This was the moment of collapse, not of their relationship, which remained notably resilient, but of the quiet assumption that their home would always stand apart from institutional change. The walls that had long protected their shared world now reflected back a harsher truth. In an era of transparency, even the most personal royal arrangements are subject to public reckoning. The shift was not marked by dramatic scenes at the gates or visible upheaval. Instead, it unfolded through policy language, careful briefings, and the steady drumbeat of media analysis. Observers noted that what was once described in affectionate terms, eccentric, loyal, unconventional, was now discussed using different vocabulary: appropriate, justified, sustainable. In that change of language lay the real turning point. Royal Lodge was no longer just their story. It had become part of the story the monarchy tells about itself in a more demanding age. In the wake of heightened scrutiny, the story of Royal Lodge entered a quieter, more uncertain phase. There were no grand pronouncements from the front steps, no public statements outlining every detail of what might come next. Instead, the aftermath unfolded through careful reports, shifting expectations, and a sense that the security, which had once seemed fixed, was now open to reconsideration. For Sarah Ferguson, this period demanded a particular kind of composure. She continued to appear in public with characteristic warmth, speaking about family, resilience, and the causes she supports. Yet the question of where and how she would live in the long term lingered in the background of many discussions. Royal Lodge was not just a residence, it was the frame around her daily existence, the setting through which the public had come to understand her enduring connection to Andrew. Within the family, adaptations took place away from cameras. King Charles III's focus on a tighter working monarchy meant that decisions about properties, roles, and visibility had to be aligned with a broader strategy rather than personal preference. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, now with growing families and responsibilities of their own, navigated the delicate task of supporting both parents while building lives that balanced royal heritage with relative normality. For Andrew, the house remained a core constant in a life otherwise narrowed. His absence from most public duties and major ceremonial roles meant that Royal Lodge carried much of the weight of his identity, a place where he could maintain routine, privacy, and some sense of continuity. That reality, in turn, shaped the options available to Fergie. Any future decision about the lodge would inevitably touch her as well. Public reaction to this evolving situation was more contemplative than dramatic. There was curiosity, certainly, and at times sharp opinion. But there was also an awareness that behind debates over leases and residences are individuals, relationships, and a family grappling with change. Royal Lodge became a lens through which viewers could glimpse the tension between institutional reform and personal attachment. As plans were examined and possibilities weighed, one truth became clear. Whatever the eventual outcome, the era in which Royal Lodge could be regarded as an unquestioned fixture had passed. The house that had once quietly held their story together now sat at the intersection of loyalty, legacy, and modern accountability. Its future remained undecided, but its symbolic role had already shifted, from private refuge to public question. In that atmosphere, Fergie's familiar optimism took on a more measured tone. Her remarks about gratitude, home, and family carried an added weight, heard against a backdrop of uncertainty rather than security. The steadiness with which she moved through this chapter did not erase the strain of it. Instead, it suggested someone long accustomed to living at the edge of change, learning once again how to stand upright while the ground beneath her quietly shifts. In the stillness of evening, when the lights of Royal Lodge glow softly against the trees, it is easy to forget just how unusual its story has become. This is not simply a house in Windsor Great Park, it is the setting for one of the most enduring partnerships in recent royal history, a post-divorce companionship that has weathered scrutiny, affection, and change. For Sarah Ferguson, the lodge has been a place of holding on to family life with Beatrice and Eugenie, holding on to a version of stability after years of public turbulence, holding on to a bond with Andrew that defies neat explanation. Neither a conventional marriage nor a clean separation, but something in between, shaped by shared experience and long memory. Today, Royal Lodge sits at a crossroads. It is caught between eras, a relic of a more expansive monarchy and a focal point in one seeking to demonstrate restraint and responsibility. To some, it represents loyalty, two people choosing to remain in each other's lives long after the official story ended. To others, it raises quieter questions about privilege, consequence, and how far tradition can stretch in a changing world. Perhaps the truth lies in the tension between those views. The house held them together when many assumed they would drift apart. It gave them a space to remain a family in their own way, even as the institution around them evolved. But no refuge is entirely timeless. As the monarchy continues to adapt, Royal Lodge stands as both memory and question mark, a reminder of what once felt certain, and a symbol of what cannot be guaranteed. Whatever its ultimate fate, the story it carries is already written into the fabric of modern royal life,